To Tariff or Not to Tariff, Shakespearean overtones to our title last week on the public square. And I don't even know, is this just part two? What is this week's conversation, Dave?
Well, this is extra credit homework for the people who got ripped off last time.
I see. Okay, let's explain that we couldn't include the whole panel last week, could we?
Yeah, we had, first off, when people pray for us, we really do appreciate it. It's very important. Your prayers really, truly matter, because behind the scenes, pulling together a broadcast of this magnitude from multiple studios, where we're always at least in 3 locations, and that doesn't include guests that we bring on. The technology is wonderful to be able to do that, but every now and then, things just don't go well. And it was my turn last week. I'll save you the fact that it took literally 48 hours to bring it all back together again, required a complete rebuilding of one of our studio facilities.
Oh, man. Wow.
Yeah, and I sat in the chair for the whole thing, boss. I strapped in, and I didn't move, which is really sad for all the technical people who had to work through me. It's like working through a stone. It's like Fred Flintstone sitting here. Okay, we can't get rid of him. Just do it for him. No, he wants to know how to do it. He wants to know why it went wrong. So there we are. But what ended up happening is we were completely off our broadcast schedule. We weren't able to record until the following day, and we didn't even start recording until 5:30 p.m. Wow. That's when the text finally gave us the green light, which means Wayne and Melanie and Jeff got shut out of last week's broadcast. They had done all their homework. They had researched all the articles. They brought interesting things to the table. And then they got bumped for like the 3 knuckleheads, me, Alan.
Rob, I think it was like 3-man basketball last week.
Yeah, it was different, but we got it done. We got it in, and we weren't going to be stopped. So, yeah, we played a little 3-on-3.
So to be fair, we now are bringing to you part 2 of the subject, which is Wayne and what Jeff has to bring and what Melanie has to bring. But also what's happened is listener input has told us that A, we're on the right track, B, please give us more. What we've been hearing from listeners is if someone's having a quiet, civil, thoughtful, all sides considered conversation on this, and we're actually interested in that. And the reason that's important is because tariffs have fallen quickly into the shirts and skins dynamic of American politics. So if you're a Trump enthusiast or a loyalist, which you have every right to be, people are nervous about someone stepping on the president's turf, so to speak, because he staked out this issue in a very big way. And of course, people that are opposed to Donald Trump right now are wanting someone to stand up and make a radical condemnation of all of this just because it's Trump. And we don't play the game that way. This is kind of like balls and strikes. You got to call it as you see it. And to be quite honest, some of the pitches we're not sure about. They're on a corner, you know. We're not. So we're looking at the strike zone here and trying to figure out what can history teach us as well as what does the Bible say about this. So that's where we go back in. And now, Wayne, it's like a tag team match. Now we're tagging 3 out and 3 in.
Well, I thought we were playing basketball, but suddenly we were playing baseball. But that's okay. I
we're wrestling. In any case, you all get extra credit.
Okay. I think the computer ate my homework, but I'm going to rely on Jeff and Melanie to fill in the blanks from last week's missing conversation. So let's get started. Where did you guys leave off last week? Let's recap.
Well, Jeff, what do you want to bring to the table, I think, is the most important thing, because we came to the idea that tariffs is like a game, like a board game. It's not like Jenga. Yeah. We're not worried about the world falling apart because someone pulled the wrong thing out, but it is complicated, like Catan or a game of chess. There's multiple layers. That's what we were saying. And that's not a duck or a dodge. Mm-hmm. It's saying that tariffs have value and potential good.
Yes.
But we're about 100 years short of experience on that. So, Jeff, maybe you want to bring in some of that historical research you brought to us.
Well, yeah. So, in my opinion, tariffs are a double-edged sword. They can do some very beneficial things in the short term, it seems to me, but there's more long-term detriment the longer that they are in place. But anyway, so some early tariffs in American history being 1789. The Tariff Act of 1789, America's a brand new country. We're just getting started. George Washington is just sworn in as our nation's first president and imposed a 5% tariff on all imports. And the intent was to raise revenue and promote domestic manufacturing, which, the industrial age was in its infancy at that time. And almost all manufacturing was in the North. 1828 was a bad tariff in many ways, in that it really hurt the South. Of course, the South was a agricultural part of the country, and it was based upon slavery, that economy. But it was imposed upon the United States by the United States Congress in 1828 to punish imports, foreign imports, and to promote, again, manufacturing, which already was primarily in the North and in the Midwest. And it created quite a bit of resentment in the South, saying, you guys are, or y'all, I should say, y'all are hurting us and our ability to import, and we are not able to sell our products overseas as well. And then the straw that broke the camel's back was the tariff, the Morrill, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but the Morrill tariff in 1861, which was passed right after Abraham Lincoln was sworn in. And that for the South, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. They said, you have really increased these tariffs now. It was a vast increase. That's going to put us out of business. You don't care about us, so fine, we are leaving the United States of America.
I think we have to point out, don't we, that the tariffs were there was no income tax. This is how the country was funded at that time.
That is correct.
So there's a regional problem on taxation imposed by the government on our own people. Now, Jeff, what about the tariffs? Was it the 30s that there was another attempt on tariffs?
Yeah, 1930 was Smoot-Hawley, or sometimes it's called Hawley-Smoot. Willis Hawley was a member of the House of Representatives, and Mr. Smoot was a member of the United States Senate. And that imposed quite a bit of tariffs on imported goods, thinking, well, let's increase manufacturing here in the United States. Let's protect what we've got. We had just gone into the Great Depression in October of 1929. So, it was almost an act of desperation. Now, a lot of economists at that time said, no, we don't want to do that. The immediate benefit was that domestic production did increase shortly, not long after it was enacted, and then everything fell dramatically. International trade was punished. International trade fell off. And so there are historians and economists that point to Smoot-Hawley as a major problem that started creating the international tensions of World War II. It was not the cause, but it certainly didn't help anything. Now, that didn't last long because that was later repealed once Franklin Roosevelt was sworn in and replaced with something else.
So one thing that we see in common in all of these actions is these are tariffs that are created by the United States Congress, not by the administration.
Yeah, that's right. It's not an American president just saying, okay, I'm going to arbitrarily raise tariffs on this country or this product or that product.
Yeah, which is a big point. And I think that that's something that we didn't discuss last week at length. Of course, we're waiting for Jeff to give us the history background on some of these other tariffs. But one thing they do have in common is that this was Congress. Now, we've grown quite addicted in the last over the last several administrations, I'd say over the last 20 years at least, to believing that our government operates in two sectors. It operates in Article 2 and Article 3. Now, Article 1 is Congress. We've sort of forgotten that was the first article and for a reason and the most powerful language in our Constitution. Article 2 is the executive branch, which also includes, unfortunately, the fourth level of government that is not constitutionally created, which is the administrative branch, the bureaucracy. We think that the presidents get elected to create policy and sign things, and then everything's supposed to change. That's way out of bounds in regards to constitutional interpretation. Then the other side, whoever it is, whichever side it disagrees, will then go to Article 3, which is the courts, and try to sue the pants off of everything to stop that policy or initiate another. So we're living like somebody that really desperately needs corrective surgery, or at least a chiropractor to put them back in right order in place. Yeah. We are completely out of joint in regards to the way our Constitution is supposed to operate. And it doesn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. It's a power curve. And whoever gets that point of power and can, in essence, it always ends up being who's got the fastest getaway car. Whoever can get into the power curve and then drive the car as fast as they can before somebody stops them is directing policy. Well, that's like a playground fight, man. That's not the way a constitutional government was ordered or constructed. And Jeff's history lesson is a perfect example. Congress made movement had consequence, Congress had to change because consequences changed. So this gives people a chance at the table to have representative government. What we have right now is reactionary government across the board. And again, this is not to condemn this administration. It's been going on for over 20 years.
Right.
Melanie, I know you want in on this.
And Dave, over the years, Congress has delegated authority over to the executive branch. In 1934, they passed the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act, which gave President Roosevelt the ability to charge tariffs at certain rates. And then in the 60s, there was the Trade Expansion Act, and I think this is the one that the Trump administration used in the first term with regard to steel and aluminum imports. So there have been occasions over time where the executive branch has received congressional authority to do X, Y, and Z in terms of the tariff policies.
Let me take a break here. We're just getting underway with this discussion. Very helpful already. So stay tuned for more in The Public Square. We'll be back in just a moment. We're found online at thepublicsquare.com.
Every day, people across the nation contribute to the mission of the Public Square. Because of those gifts, this broadcast is now heard on the radio coast to coast every day. Thousands are finding the path to true liberty every day because of the support of listeners just like you. Your gifts of any and every size are reaching lives today. Thank you for your support.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Here's the team for this week's edition of The Public Square. Melanie Elsey, Jeff Sanders, Alan C. Duncan is our producer, and Dave Zanotti, of course, and Rob Walgate is here. Rob, kick off segment 2, if you would.
Well, since we recorded last week's show on tariffs and everything's going on, I know one of the things we talked about is our dependence as a country on receiving goods from other countries, and we need to produce more things. But there was one article that jumped at me this week. Supply chain AI company sounds the alarm over America's reliance on Chinese-made pharmaceuticals. The AI supply chain Exeger talked about how we rely on so much of our medicines and what medicines are made out of from China, India, so many other places, and that the tariffs are going to have to be imposed maybe down the road on these types of goods to try and bring back everything in-house. When you look at, as a country, the United States is far more addicted to pharmaceuticals than any other nation.
There's no doubt.
When it comes to that. So if we want to have some of these key ingredients for medicines or the medicines themselves, we're going to need to bring them back home. According to the Exeger report, the U.S. currently imports 75% of its essential medicines, with most of them coming from China and India.
And that's repeated from product to product, right? It doesn't apply to pharmaceuticals, automobiles, everything. Parts come from all over the world.
Isn't that two sides of the same coin, which both sides have to really be considered? Because I think on the fiscal side of the coin, what the administration is trying to accomplish is in tandem with tax policy and energy policy. So you've got tariffs, you've got whether or not you hold or extend the tax breaks, and then you've got energy policy to bring the gas prices down. On the side of the coin Rob just brought up, you've got capacity issues and dependence issues internationally, because even since the years that Jeff was citing, our reliance and the types of products that are manufactured. We didn't have any of the tech products back then. So there are a lot of products that are produced, pieces and parts all around the world that we depend on. So capacity on our own production and the fiscal policy have to collide in a way that is helpful and not make it a huge crash.
And I think today we look at fiscal policy and what does it do in the next week and how does that impact the stock market? We're not willing to make a decision to have some short-term pain for long-term gain because everyone's going to panic every day when the market opens on what's happening today, as if everyone's going to spend that money in their portfolio tomorrow.
I tell you what, as someone who relies upon pharmaceuticals to live, that would be me, I am very nervous that some of the things that I have to take in order to stay alive are made in communist China. How pure are these drugs? How accurate? Are you going to buy food made in China? I'm certainly not going to do that. How many times have we heard about people buying pet food that we found out was made in China and it poisoned their pet? I don't trust their FDA. I barely trust our own, but I certainly don't trust theirs or USDA.
So, Jeff, let me ask you a tough question in that regard. And it's a stupid question. Okay, so you forgive me in advance. Somebody's just coming across this going, whoa, that sounds like you hate that you all, not just you hate the Chinese people? What, do you think that they're dog killers?
Well,
I mean, because you've spent time in China. Yeah, you speak Chinese.
I've lived in China. I speak enough Chinese to get by. I know their history. I've gone to school at their universities. They are the Chinese people I have gotten to know are absolutely wonderful people. It's not the people of China. It is their communist government. They are illegitimate, and they are out to take over as much of the world as possible. And they hate us. I don't hate the Chinese people, but I certainly don't trust their government or what they're up to.
And it raises another question that's mentioned in this article. When it comes to Chinese exports, even with pharmaceuticals, how much of forced labor is being used? Because that's still a problem in China, having forced labor on some of these products.
So let me ask this question. And Wayne, suddenly I'm hearing the sounds of Chinese Christians in a cave singing hymns to the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah, several years ago, I was involved in a project that identified that our Christmas lights were assembled by Chinese slave labor, which was a documented fact a number of years ago. That kind of thing. So yes, I conjure up the same pictures. The other thing is, since this whole topic came up, I started looking at the labels of things I use around the house. Holy smokes. I mean, practically everything is made in China.
And even if it's made in Bangladesh or in Brazil, that could be a factory owned by a Chinese communist company.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
And delivered by Amazon, by the way.
Yeah.
Amazon.
These are really significant points. Ellen, I see you trying to get in. Give me 1 second here. Let me make this one point. We've talked about the biblical reality of this. The reason that I hear the sounds of those hymns being sung from the caves is because you were there, Wayne, and we've never disclosed sources. Yeah. A number of the people on this staff, at least 3, have ministered in China. So we have missionaries associated closely with this organization that have been ministers to China for a lifetime. This is not about loving the people of China. This is about the Communist Party and their economic designs on the free world. And are we being realistic here? Or are we just doing bean counting and forgetting any questions of loving our neighbor as we love ourselves, which the book of James calls the golden rule, the royal law, I should say. It calls it the royal law. Yeah. And so this is a point where people of faith need to come into this conversation asking more. Okay, Alan, sorry, I think I jumped right in on you. Do you want to jump in on
No,
this?
of course. I think we've mentioned this before on this broadcast, but it bears mentioning again here just because it fits in with the piece. We do book publication at the American Policy Roundtable and the Public Square, and we've got a book, Jesus, His Story, the book, The Front Steps. We did not want to get these books printed in a place that had suspect labor practices, and it was very difficult. Anna could speak to this more because she handled more of this, but it was very difficult to find a publishing house that would print these books at a high quality for us and not use bad labor practices. But we eventually found one in the Western Hemisphere to do this for us. I believe it's a Canadian publishing house that printed the books for us. So
thank you, Canada.
Yeah, you just have to try. It's going to take effort to do it. I think that's the big piece. You have to have the will and the determination to get it done in a different way.
And forgive me, Alan, if I extend your point too far, but Wayne, one of the biggest challenges that we had when we brought Jesus, His Story out was we wanted to come up with 2 editions. The one we have is absolutely beautiful. And we get, and it's very inexpensive as well. It's a beautiful publication of the life of Christ. And at around Easter time, we always get notes coming in, people saying, once again, turning to Jesus, His story, and reading the narrative of the life of Christ is transformational in my family. And they thank us. We didn't write the book. We just had the opportunity to bring it back to print. And we're thrilled to do that. But we wanted to bring a gift edition, a leather-bound, Bible-like looking edition, because it is all scriptures. Do you know that we couldn't find a printer in the United States that still does Bibles? They're all produced overseas and mostly in China.
Yeah, not surprised. A lot of Bible publishers I know have printed in many times, not all the time, but many times in China.
Yeah, so if we're thinking that we're just taking on people like Apple, like we did last time around, and then the big 100 companies on market capitalization, the Christians are getting all their Bibles from China too.
Yeah. To tie your point, Dave, with what Jeff said, I mean, these believers in China, they have to exist in their society, right? Which is they have communist overlords. So they have to participate to make a living in this communist economy of China.
Maybe the Holy Spirit would invite us as people. I don't know how many are listening today. We have ratings and stuff. We know kinda, but you never know what God's doing. What if the Holy Spirit's asking the church in the West to pray for the liberation of Chinese Christians, for the freedom of the people of China?
Yeah, wouldn't be the first time. It happened many years ago. So let's fire it up again, huh?
Yeah, so we do have a political problem here, and it's turning into an economic problem. But our goal is to love our neighbor as ourselves. Let's pray for freedom. And let's also pray that we get our act together. If there's any sense of moral superiority that comes off across this, heaven forbid. Heaven forbid. I wouldn't want to run a chart on the sinfulness of the United States versus the sinfulness of any people in the world. Because with all of our great liberty and all of our great religious rhetoric and all the things that we do, we got a lot of problems right here.
We've said often, godless capitalism is no different than godless communism. I mean, the exploitation that can be made of others when you don't love your neighbor.
Well, our godless capitalism got us into the position where now we're just in bed with godless communism because we wanted things cheaper.
Excellent.
It's just hand in glove.
Yes, there you go.
And you go across, Wayne, what we were talking about last week. This is where people want to make this shirts and skins, D's and R's, Trumps versus everybody else, MAGA versus the world. Whoa. Take the top 100 valued companies on market capitalization, and what do you see? You see the top 5 are tech companies. And then you start to look down and then you ask yourself, what's the China factor in every single one of these companies? Maybe every single one.
All right, we've got to take a break here on the Public Square, but we've got a lot more to come, so you stay with us. And as I always say, you can listen to this program online if you have to leave now or if you joined us late, want to hear from the beginning, go to thepublicsquare.com. Download that free smartphone app. It's there for the purpose of listening and having new listeners join us as well. So pass that around. The Public Square, free in your app store. Let's continue our conversation in the public square today about tariffs and the economy. And last week, for technical reasons, Melanie and Jeff weren't able to be here. Melanie, I think maybe you had more you would have wanted to share last week, so let's get after it now.
Well, some of what was really imprinted on my heart as I was listening to the broadcast from last week is the fact that we're called as individuals to be stewards of resources, stewards of our time, certainly our financial resources, in both tax policy and tariff policy on businesses. It's hard to be a good steward when you can't control what is being imposed upon you fiscally, at least. As more and more of our, like in our personal situation, more than 50% of our income disappears. That's not as a percentage of what we earn that we have no stewardship over except through our elected representatives and how they spend what they take from our paychecks. So stewardship to me is a big issue, and it's hard to do that when we can't control the policy or we don't even understand the policies that are being developed. I know I have a high interest in one of the gentleman that keeps coming up in the news cycles is Kevin Hassett, who is the chairman of the economic policy advisors in the White House. I started really appreciating his explanations of economic policy probably about 6 or 7 years ago during President Trump's first term. It's like, wow, I understood what that man had to say. And it made me want to listen to him more. And so he's someone that I have a little bit of confidence that he's giving us a straight shoot in terms of an interpretation of what they're doing behind the scenes. And I think a lot of it on the tariff policies, we have to just step back and see what develops from these unilateral negotiations that they're happening country by country. That's going to take a lot of time to get through. But from my perspective, stewardship is a big part of it because we lose part of our capacity to be stewards when we can't control what's being done with our own personal wealth in terms of income. The other aspect of last week's program that I caught in your discussion was the capacity for us to be able to produce. And at income per hour rates that, like China, if they're paying people $3 an hour, that's not going to happen here in the U.S. in terms of the manufacturing of certain items. But what we have lacked in our country over many decades is the training in the skills trades. And certainly, there aren't many schools that will train electricians, HVAC, welders, et cetera, from a Christian perspective. But I found a really great school out of Philadelphia. It's Williamson College of the Trades. It was originally founded in 1888.
Wow.
It's been around a long time. And if you go on their website, they share that they teach the trades from a Christ-centered perspective. It's really pretty cool. They had a career fair earlier this year in 2025 where 180 companies came to hire or interested in hiring students from this school. And they were that many companies coming in to talk to maybe 500 students. So it's like sort of a hidden jewel, but there needs to be more of these institutions, and I'm sure there are out there that would offer much needed training in the skills of the trades.
Yeah, I know of another one, Crown College in Powell, Tennessee. I'm looking at their website. It says, in addition to getting degrees in Bible and theology and so forth, School of Trades and Technology, building construction, auto diesel technology, HVAC, welding. I ought to enroll. I'd love to learn how to weld. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, it goes back to last week's conversation about theology of work. It's not just work that's white collar, but this kind of work is essential as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, God bless them. All of them who are out there doing this. Can't give them enough credit.
Well, and you think about this. This is another interesting question of stewardship, Melanie, because there's a change that's coming. Now, again, all of this has got to be honestly discussed inside the construct of what we set up last week and what we've been talking about for 20 years. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough people to sustain our current economy, let alone the safety net that our elected officials have put into this construct, which we'll talk about in a few minutes a little bit more. We don't have enough people. So we need people to be in a position where they're willing to have children. And I don't know how, other than to pray that God will inspire people to life, that we can fall in love with love again and fall in love with living again. I mean, we need great love songs again in this world. We need to rediscover the wonder of marriage, the fellowship, the beauty of true love. I mean, every American needs to watch Princess Bride about 4 times. I mean, we need to get back to Glenn Campbell and Jimmy Webb songs. I mean, we've got to come back to the understanding that what the world needs now is love, sweet love. And it starts with men and women and the beauty and the wonder of what God started in the garden, which came before the whole idea of going out there and working. I mean, he made male and female for a reason. And we've got to come back to that discovery. And that fundamentally is the construct from which economy comes. It's men and women coming together in holy matrimony, having children, and becoming an economic unit that kids can count on at some level for their whole lives to move them forward. Now, that ties into trades and labor because, when people came over here with a piece of bread in their pocket, they were thrilled to be, and like the Italians came over in the early 1900s. They came over, they got caught and trapped in the Padron system. They were handed a shovel and $1 a week and a tenement to go live in with 20 other people. They were in essence slaves to a system and treated as half-white. All right, that's the way, and you do the history. We need people who are willing to come to this country and people who are being raised up in this country who are willing to say, work. I mean, our relatives, if they could get rid of the shovel and become a plumber or a welder or an electrician, that was like a PhD degree because they could work their whole lives with a skill. They had something to trade with. And people became wealthy in those industries because they were willing to work. The skilled trades are absolutely essential at every level. We got into this idea that if you're really special, you want to have a white collar and never have to sweat for a living. Telling you right now, that's all about to change big time.
Mm-hmm. We just did some remodeling on our home, and by far the most expensive labor cost, not getting into the material cost, but the most expensive labor cost was the electrician. Mm-hmm. By far. So, I mean, there is good wages that can be earned through the trades. And you don't end up with a ton of college debt, after the fact.
I got to tell you, we were recently at our office in Florida, and we had some questions on some plumbing stuff. So somebody came out, a great company that we work with in Central Florida, and the gentleman that they sent, he was fantastic. He said, "I've been doing this my whole life." He said, I've done so well with this company that, to be honest with you, I pick the hours now I want to work, and I spend the rest of the time with my wife and my kids, and we're doing just great.
Wow, I want to be in that job.
Nice to hear.
That'd be great.
Well, it's my job to break in once again, sadly, but we do need to take a break. It's a good break. And by the way, did you know that this program is listener-supported? That's true. This program only exists because listeners fund it, make it possible, and we appreciate your support very much. You'll find us online at thepublicsquare.com. The team will continue the conversation to Tariff or Not to Tariff, Part 2, coming up on The Public Square. What an interesting conversation today on the Public Square, and I'm glad you're a part of it. Thanks for tuning in today. You can listen on radio, of course, on many radio stations, and we're so grateful for those stations, and online, thepublicsquare.com, and with that smartphone app called The Public Square. All right, Dave, back to you to get the team going again here.
Well, Melanie made an interesting comment earlier I want to come back to, and in this segment and in the last, because the question becomes, if you're giving half of your income away to state and federal and local taxation, do you still feel that you have a voice in that process? And there's almost a certain sense of hopelessness. We've become so entrenched in taxation that we're just sort of like people who are living with a giant in the land that we are terrified of. And so we're happy to just live with what's left. We're like Gideon hiding in a wine press, just hoping we can eat out an existence because half of what we thought was ours isn't. There is a sense of hopelessness in that midst, and we have to speak against that because it is, in essence, the notion of having your right to stewardship stripped from you and you not having a voice in the process is what began everything in this country 250 years ago on Lexington Green. If people think it was taxation that caused our country to develop into the Declaration of Independence, it wasn't just taxation. The full statement is taxation without representation. America wasn't birthed as an anti-tax land. It was birthed as a representative land. The notion that we need a constitutional republic built upon the consent of the governed, and the governed had no consent because they had no voice. Now, I fear that we're getting back into that arena, especially when we're being governed either by executive orders of the White House, no matter who the president is, or the reactionary actions of political judges in the federal court system, who are carefully shopped and then carefully curated, and then the cases come into where now the judiciary is fighting the executive. Where is the voice of the people from the House of the people? Where is the United States Congress? Now, they have been absent so long. They deserve all the names we can throw at them as a body. I'll resist the temptation because it doesn't do us any good to get any more emotional than we already are over this. But we have lost our representation, not because we're not voting, not because we're not running people for the House and the Senate, but because once they get there, they sit back and spend all their time doing interviews. When are they going to govern? When are they going to step up into this?
They do interviews and they deflect, and it's always someone else's problem instead of stepping up and be a leader. But I'm also reminded, Dave, of a hidden recording that took place a handful of years ago when Mitt Romney was running for president. And he talked about the amount of people and the percentage of people that actually pay the bills in the country and pay taxes. And that created a buzz and it created a stir when he said that basically 50% or a little less than 50% of the people are the ones
47%.
Are footing the entire bill. I think that also creates a bit of divisiveness in the fact of you have half the folks paying the bill, half the folks and maybe not as much as 53% that don't want to do anything about the bill, but are reaping the benefits of the bill. And we probably need to see us come together in a realm where everyone has some skin in the game of some sort, especially if you are physically able and of working age in this country.
Well, this is where pastoral leadership, male and female, is essential. It's vital. This is where academic leadership is essential and vital, regardless of race or gender. This is something that we've got to come to terms with, because if 47% of American households are not paying into the federal tax system, now they're paying taxes, don't get me wrong, these are not wicked people. This is what always happens. We end up playing shirts and skins on this right from the start, or we boil it down into race. This doesn't even cut in the racial situation, because there are more white people in the benefits game than there are black people on the gross number.
Not even close.
Not even close. So let's quit kidding ourselves. This is a mindset that it's not about melatonin. It's a mindset that says I can come up with an alternative way of living because I'm an American. And, if I'm willing to reduce my lifestyle and be highly creative on the cash side, I can beat the system. While these other suckers are paying 50% of everything they got. Now, look, I'm all for creativity and hard work, but that's not what you call consent of the governed. I mean, nobody's in on the deal. Where's Congress? Again, we can't even have these conversations in Congress. When's the last time you saw a hearing where people put up the 47% number and said, let's talk about this in the light of day with everybody? No, it's a secret pirated tape that comes out, and then a politician has it used against him in an election because now he's racist, he hates poor people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and he loses an election. Alan, your turn.
Well, on the other end of the extreme, I'm just thinking we're talking about people on the far end of the poverty extreme, not paying taxes, or on the low end. But doesn't it happen on the highest of the high end as well, with some billionaires finding a way to, quote unquote, legally get out of paying income taxes because they don't technically take an income, and they can game the system. They know finance as well, and they're employing people, but they're not necessarily paying income taxes either. They can kind of legally skirt it in some ways.
Well,
legally,
I got to tell you, that's a little bit more myth than reality, but it's a fair question, and I appreciate you bringing it to the table because it's on the news cycle all the time. So let's talk about that for a while. Rob, go. You look like you're anxious.
Well, I'm thinking about the debate with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton when that was brought up, and he talked about the fact that then Senator Clinton and her colleagues had through the years made the tax code so complex and given all those wealthy folks the ability to write so many things off or to hide things in different corporations or to bury things in businesses. We've created an entity, when you look at the number of pages in tax code, that is insanely complex. And I don't know if there needs to be in the way it is. So I think there's that. But I will say, when you look at the percentage of people that pay the number of taxes in this country, it's a very small percent of people that pay over, I believe, 70 or 80% of the taxes. So there's a lot of rich people footing the bill for everyone.
Well, I didn't say rich people. I just said billionaires.
Yeah.
Well, that's rich.
Billionaires are rich people.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's the next level of rich person. It depends on where you're defining it.
Right. It is true that there are tax loopholes. It's also true that everyone, even billionaires, pay taxes. They may figure out ways to pay a smaller percentage, but when you take a percentage of billions, to Rob's point, that's still paying a big chunk of the total pie in terms of what the revenue the federal government takes in. But they also pay payroll taxes. They pay other types of taxes that are a part of what they produce or part of what their businesses yield.
One thing I can say about benefits to wealthy people is if you're going to get one, you have to really lose the money. Yeah. When you make a write-off, you have to really lose the money. Mm-hmm. You can't make a mythical, you can't create a unicorn and write it off. The money genuinely has to be invested or lost. Secondly, no matter how much money a person makes, there is a responsibility on taxation. I don't know of a single tax-free dollar that's out there. Mm-hmm. If that dollar comes across the hands of a billionaire, they owe something on it. Now, Melanie's right. If they're not working a salaried job so that the government's getting their withdrawal out of every week, but they're living off of, let's say, a family endowment that goes back 3 or 4 or 5 generations, and so they have capital gains and they're coming in off of their investments, they're going to pay tax on every one of those dollars. And so the fact is that the idea that they're escaping, what ends up happening is a lot of times people look at corporate returns where a company's making a boatload of money and they're able, because of investments and other things over time, they're able to some years walk away from taxation because they've paid so much over the last 5 years or 3 years that they don't have to keep going. So it's a very rough ride in that situation. And when it comes to who's carrying the burden, there's no question whatsoever that the top 50% of the earners of America pay almost all the taxes.
Well, let me break in so we can take a break on the public square and come back with a big finale here to this conversation. Such an important topic today. For those of you who have to leave us at this time, you've always got the online version to listen to the rest, thepublicsquare.com. Let's continue the conversation on the public square with the team this week. And boy, this has been so helpful to me. I've been scribbling notes here. I hope listeners have as well. So go ahead, Dave.
Well, people could get mad at President Trump because it appears that he's learning on the job. Now, this is his second term, and he did get involved in tariffs and learn some things the first time around. And it'd be easy to point a finger and say, he's president of the United States, he should know better. Look, I've been in the public policy business for 45 years. We've all been at this for a lifetime, and we're still learning. Yeah. There's just, you can't know it all. So the president may be on a learning curve at this stage in the game. And of course, he will be summarily smashed for the rhetoric that he states that always seems to be final, that always seems to be over the top, or most of the time. And of course, his opponents are just, the guy just, like somebody said to me the other day, if he walked across Lake Erie, they'd say he couldn't swim. All right, I mean, it's just it's okay. It's okay. All right, that's just the way some people feel, and we're not partisans in this game. So we all have our choices, but we're not here to make those choices public and impress anybody with them. But here's something that just came out from the president in regards to something he calls non-tariff cheating. And he's listed 8 methodologies whereby international trade doesn't come across fair to the United States. 1 is currency manipulation. 2, VAT taxes. 3, dumping materials below cost. 4, export subsidies. 5, protective agricultural standards. 6, protective technical standards. 7, counterfeiting, piracy, and IP theft, over $1 trillion a year. 8, transshipping to evade tariffs. Those of us that come from business, particularly from manufacturing backgrounds, can tell you for certain those things are real. Now, we're back to the Catan game. Everything comes under the name of the game, but boy, there's so many different pieces and parts of that game. So now it appears that the president's team is beginning to say, okay, below the word tariff are the following 8 subsets of problems. So they're getting deeper as they go along. And I think there's hope that we may come out of this in a better place. So I think that's important. I think it's very important. So, but I also, that's one thing. Then I want to go back to this idea, what Melanie said, half of everything that they earn is gone. Now, I can tell you from knowing Melanie and John for a lifetime, they're not even remotely in the consideration of rich as opposed to American rich. Middle class in America now means you do give up 50% of everything. And it didn't used to be that way. When we were in, you go back to 1948, a middle-class family was barely losing 2% of their total income to taxation. Things have changed.
That's a stunner.
And think too, Dave, in that context, with the 50% that we have that we can control, how many Americans are in debt and can't manage the other 50% that they do have coming in to their bank accounts. The 2 areas that have been most frustrating for me to observe in how the media covers these issues is the whole discussion on cutting taxes, keeping the tax breaks that were put into place years ago, and you actually have people arguing that the tax breaks should be removed so people should pay more taxes. The other area that I simply don't understand why anyone would have a problem, and that is the work of cutting waste or fraudulent spending with our tax dollars on the 50% that we give up for the government to use. And in each of those areas, we have congressional control. Each of those areas, it's Congress that controls the policies and the purse strings and the capacity to go after the waste and abuse. They're talking about all of these fraudulent activities that have happened in terms of payouts from all across this federal government, all the agencies. And yet, with regard to Social Security and Medicare, anyone who complains about the fact that they're finding waste and abuse says that they're trying to cut Medicare and Social Security benefits when they're not. They're trying to make sure that those who should receive those benefits can continue to receive them. So the bottom line of all of this discussion is it matters who is serving in Congress. It matters what seats are going to be up. And on the House side, it's going to be everybody in a year and a half. On the Senate side, it's going to be a third of the Senate. And those elections cycle and the terms of the presidential term are extraordinarily important this time around.
I think next time we have an election, which will be what?
26.
Next year. Great. Ask your local politician who's running, do you believe we pay in this area too few taxes or too many taxes? Too little or too much? And if they say, like Joy Behar does, that we don't pay enough, you go right ahead and pay all the taxes you want. You can pay more taxes. Leave me alone.
Well, I don't think the United States as a whole or local entities have a revenue problem. They have a spending problem. And that was the goal of DOGE, right? To look at where the excess spending was taking place and find a way to get rid of that. Because from a revenue perspective, the United States is bringing in plenty of money. Plenty of money.
Trillions
it's just
every
how
year.
much do we waste and where do we spend it? And how do we get a better handle on that? Then when you do get a handle on it, we have to understand, and this is the difficult part, again, it's short-term pain. There's going to be people we know that may be out of a job that works for the government. There may be a program that you became, hey, I like that program, but when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, is that the role of government to be running that program? So those are the things that Americans are feeling and have to understand that to benefit long term, you're going to have to get rid of.
So very simply put, the 50% that we receive, we have to decide how it's spent. The 50% that is taken by various levels of government, our stewardship is not the money. Our stewardship is our vote.
And isn't Congress our vehicle for how that money is spent? I think a lot of the objection to the waste cutting is the methodology and the fact and the absence of Congress in the process.
That's exactly right.
This is the call. The call on all of this is calling on Congress to show up. Now, it's going to be tough for Congress to spend much more time hiding because the culmination of an attempt to show on paper and recover where legally able to recover $1 billion in wasteful spending at this stage in the game is a brilliant call. And if they get to that number even on paper, it will prove the point that what Rob just said, it's not about money, it's about what we're doing with it. And I don't think anyone has any question that if they stay at it, they're going to find it because it's there. And it's been excessive in the last, and this again, this includes both the Trump and the Biden and the Obama administrations and the Bush administration. This is the power curve of Congress. You can't ornament it by simply attacking the political parties. This is the people who live there, and we need better people working there. We need people with more courage and bigger voices to come out on behalf of fiscal integrity.
And if someone makes a decision in regards to fiscal integrity and they don't have a letter next to their name that you like, you can still applaud them. You can still say, boy, what they said made sense. And I agree with that. We have a problem in this country applauding someone or saying, yes, that's a good policy, if they don't belong to the team that we like. That's the mistake I think we're making in this country.
Okay, 60 seconds to wrap it up, Dave.
Well, I think that we need to pray for the people of China. I think we need to pray for our Congress. I think we need to pray for our leaders and ask God for mercy that we can come to a greater level of truth-telling. And if you're mad at us for trying, pray for us. Yeah. Because we're praying for you. We don't have all the answers, but what we're trying to figure out is how do you get to the right questions?
Right. Yeah, I appreciate you doing that very much. So, okay, that'll wrap it up for this week's edition of The Public Square. Please pass our website and smartphone app availability around to your friends and neighbors. Let them know that we exist. That's the only advertising budget we have is you. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for your support of The Public Square through the American Policy Roundtable. Thanks to the team. I'm Wayne Shepherd. We'll see you next time on The Public Square.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.